I want to give you the mic. Just tell me your thoughts about this potential. It's, Roe v. Wade is still the law of the land. This memo comes out, and just sound off for a moment, just your thoughts on the possibility of Roe v. Wade being overturned, what this means for women.
So I'm rocking my 1973 hat right now that I have been rocking actually for the last 3 years or so. I sit on the board of the National Institute for Reproductive Health Action Fund, which is the political arm of reproductive health and rights and advocacy organization that is working in probably half the states around this country. Has been for years, we've been trying to push back and fight against these attacks on abortion that have been happening in the states. So we've been watching this kind of wind up. This is, I like to remind people that what we're seeing play out right now in the Supreme Court, and we do think that this ruling is going to hold, first of all. I mean, it's not really a shock and surprise given the makeup of the court, but for years now, conservatives have been doing their best to dismantle Roe versus Wade on the ground through state law. So they have been dialing back access to abortion. They've been defunding clinics. They've been creating laws that literally penalize and criminalize doctors and other folks for helping women to actually get abortions. And so it is only kind of fitting from a timeline perspective that once the Republicans got control of the Supreme Court, that they would be in the position, because of all the activity that had been boiling in the states, to now even have this conversation and rule on it. And so I'm sad to say that we aren't shocked or surprised, because this fight has been going on at this point for decades. But it is very, very sad. And everybody should be extremely afraid of what this means. And here's what I mean by that. If you look at what this draft ruling says that Justice Alito wrote, the first thing that struck me is that pretty much this iteration of the Supreme Court, which is packed with 3 justices that Donald Trump, of all people, got to add to the court, who are rabid conservatives that, frankly, the right put on the court just for the purpose of being able to scale back Roe versus Wade. They're doing exactly what they were appointed to do. What Justice Alito is saying is that we're right. This iteration of the court is right. And all those other justices back in 1973 and otherwise, they were just wrong. I think that that's telling about how this majority on this court is even viewing the law, because precedent holds that justices would look back at the Constitution and they would look back at legal precedent and then build upon that. What this court is saying is like, nah, we're actually just going to get rid of that, because that doesn't matter, and that we are suddenly indoctrinating America with what our values are and what we believe. That is really, I think, a harbinger of an attitude to come in the way that they rule on many things. And I don't know what that means to precedent under the law anymore in the United States. The second thing I'll say, Clay, that really, really scares me about this, in this draft, Alito also took aim at Lawrence versus Texas and the Obergefell ruling, which specifically granted marriage equality and LGBTQ rights. And so this is all a bellwether that LGBTQ people are on the chopping block next. And pretty much they use this opportunity to say that we're coming for you. And so if there's any reminder for everybody who's listening and watching about this particular moment where women are now losing bodily autonomy through this court, is that gender rights, racial justice, LGBTQ equality are all they're just all linked, and that we have a common enemy. Right now, the Supreme Court is not in our favor. So anybody who cares about civil rights, who cares about justice, who cares about voting rights, who cares about gender equity, these ain't your people. And they are telling us that they are coming for us. And I think that is the part that scares me the most. Yes, I, of course, am a pro-choice activist. I also am a leader in the LGBTQ rights movement and have been working on the front lines of racial justice issues in politics for 20 years. So I see the intersections of all of this. And so this is a very, very grim day. I don't think that there's anything that's going to change much about this, but I'm glad to see that somebody leaked it, at least so we all could have a heads up.
I will say a couple reminders is that Clarence Thomas, with Shelby County versus Holder, a lot of folks don't know that Clarence Thomas wanted to end the entire Voting Rights Act. He was the only one who said, end it all. Clarence Thomas. He also was the first justice to be critical of Brown versus Board of Education. That might be jaw-dropping for some people, but Justice Thomas did that. I could be going down conspiracy theory lane here. Aisha, if I am, stop me. But my fear has always been for a long time is they're coming for abortion, they're coming for same-sex marriage, and they basically gutted the Voting Rights Act. But I really believe, and if I'm wrong, correct me, they are coming for the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I think they are waiting for the right lawsuit to come before the court to say, oh, discrimination and public accommodations, those days are over. We don't need that kind of protection. That's, now people are just taking it too far. That's what I think their end goal is. I think when Lyndon B. Johnson signed that, pass it on. We must turn that back. And I say that, Aisha, because we've had civil rights acts before that have been overturned by the Supreme Court. It happened in 1883. I know it's a long time ago, but that's what I think the end game is. Am I going too far? Am I getting too worked up? Tell me.
Well, first of all, Clay, I'm so glad that you are having this conversation because I don't think that you can go too far and I don't think that you can get too worked up because all of this is completely crazy and we all should be animated and alarmed. I would even take it a step further and I would say that it's all on the table. I think that you are right in fearing that it all might be on the table. So they've already gutted the Voting Rights Act. Where do they go but to come for people with disabilities, right? To get rid of any kind of civil rights protections, public accommodations and otherwise. I would, say that sometimes I feel that this is as sinister as really being a succession movement. Like they're trying to create a situation where, the Civil War was lost, but you have an entire region of the country that has done what it could to still have some kind of autonomy as the losers, right? In this, the Confederates. I think that what's happening is a real bifurcation of America in a modern way, where there is an attempt through law and through policy to create two Americas, one in which those of us who believe in equity and justice and civil rights and inclusion live, and those who think that under the guise of states' rights, which is always the legal moniker that comes up, right? Under the guise of states' rights, it's an opportunity to completely backpedal on all that we've accomplished, all the progress we've made to integrate our society, and to really legally institute, again, discrimination, bigotry, bias, and to create a vigilante justice system where average, regular neighbors and citizens can go and report on their neighbor for whatever it is. Maybe it's two men who are in an intimate relationship. Maybe it's a woman who's seeking an abortion, whatever it might be, that these states are trying to embolden neighbors to turn against one another in order to preserve some kind of sense of, and I don't even want to call it the status quo, but I would call it like the ignorant quo, which is all to me about the white patriarchy. At the end of the day, all of this is about preserving white supremacy. It's also about preserving a patriarchal. So unless you are a white man in this country, you are screwed under this Supreme Court. And I don't think that it's alarmist at all for you to feel that way and to think it through in that way.
And may I just say this too? I saw some people on social media, and an acquaintance of mine told me this last night. Well, we're just going to have to move out of the South, move out of Alabama or Mississippi. Who can afford to do that? Are y'all serious? You think it'll be that easy? First of all, eight out of the 10 states in this country are poor states. The poorest states are red states. You think a random single mother, a single woman in Mississippi can move out of the state and just go to New York? Come on now. That can't be the idea. Oh, just move
Ridiculous.
out. Are y'all that delusional? That it's that easy to just pick up your bags and leave Georgia, leave South Carolina? Come on.
And to that point, let's actually, instead of having a flight mentality, where at this point, we're just going to pack up and we're going to take our ball and run, let's think about the power mechanism that we have in these places. So many of these red states, that's Texas, Georgia, for example, right? These states have a new majority. Let us always remember that people of color and our allies are actually the new American majority. We are the majority of the population and growing. We also need to recognize the strength and the power that we have when we see ourselves as a meaningful and critical source in these states of change. If you look at Georgia, what Stacey Abrams was able to do there when she ran for governor the first time and is continuing to do there now, is that she was able to take one of those states, to your point, where people are like, oh, well, we should just leave. The truth is that there's a reverse migration happening because the coastal states are so doggone expensive to live in. People are fleeing New York and Chicago and LA and other places, and they're all moving down to Atlanta, right? There's actually a reverse migration that's happening where you have these red states, but now you have a population that's an influx, one that is more liberal than otherwise, right? A lot of Black and brown people. Tap into the demographic power, translate that into political power, and you'll see change. Georgia is a great example of that. Now, we got a long way to go. There is horrific voter suppression going down in Georgia. The governor, Brian Kemp, is crazy. And at the same time, Georgia put 2 Democrats in the US Senate because of Stacey Abrams run for governor. So we don't run away. What we do is we stay and fight and we transform. And what happens if we do that in Mississippi or in Alabama? Huge African-American populations in those states that can make all the difference. North Carolina is another example. There's a lot of political weeds to get into on that, but I think that we should all not be dismayed by the fact that we are losing a fight that we're ill-equipped to battle in right now. We need to recognize that we actually have power in numbers and we have power in principle, and figure out how to strategize around that and what we're going to do to really win this war.
Aisha, I always say this, in 1868, we had 80% Black voter turnout, only Black men, sadly, because women couldn't vote. 1868, they were able to reinvent the South. They were able to put in, for the first time, Black folks in the House of Representatives, Black attorney generals. In 1868, they were sleeping, they were camping out at voting booths overnight in fear of traveling in the morning because they would be massacred by white mobs. 80% voter turnout. That is astounding. And now we have numbers around 50%, especially for the midterms. Let me ask you this. In what ways does this draft opinion, and like you said, we don't think it's going to change much when it's finally released, how will it affect Black communities? One thing that I think of is deputizing the average citizen. In some cases, when a woman has a miscarriage, she has to have an abortion as well, depending on the miscarriage, right? So I'm afraid of the ways in which this will affect Black men, Black women, and this idea of other citizens being able to deputize against us because of their own perception. So in what ways, we have some conservative listeners out there whom I don't believe in abortion. Okay, fine. But how will this eroding of Roe v. Wade, how can it affect our communities?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just say to all the listeners that don't believe in abortion, don't have one.
Right.
Don't have one.
Simple.
Right. All the people who don't believe in same-sex marriage, well, don't marry a person of the same sex. What I would say, more glibly, is mind your damn business, right? And this is where we get into this deputizing. The thing is that abortion isn't going to end. So to be clear, access to abortion in 22 states is already really difficult. And if this ruling goes through, is going to be impossible. That is not going to stop middle class and well-heeled white women from continuing to go get their abortions, because it's what they do. They've always done it, right? That's why abortion is a medical procedure. It's a thing. The consequence for our communities, though, are that we don't have the resources to just say, I got to get out of Houston and go find somewhere and travel 500 miles to be able to make health decisions about, our lives, to make economic family planning decisions about our lives, would ultimately are at the underpinning of why people end up having to make the tough decision to even have an abortion or not. We don't have the economic wherewithal and resources to be able to travel across state lines. And, the consequence here is that we also are the ones who often can't afford to have the same birth control access that white women do as well. Birth control is still something that you got to go and get a prescription to get, even though it is completely benign, and it's like taking a Tylenol, right? So there's not much medical risk to actually taking a birth control pill to be able to control the outcomes of your own reproductive health and life. But we often are in positions, because of health disparities, access to healthcare, that we're not able to get the same quality and type of birth control. We're not able to access the resources to have abortion. So what's that going to do to Black communities? I think there's going to be economic peril. I think that there are going to be survivalist, desperate measures where you see more Black and brown women that are resorting to unsafe ways to be able to handle pregnancy and to terminate a pregnancy if they need to. And the consequences for families then become really, really, really tough, because it's the families who end up having to support these women. And so, this isn't just about one woman who's trying to do one thing with herself, right? This is about that woman and her entire family and her entire community. And I think that Black people of all people should understand the sense of kinship and connectedness, that when one of us is going through something, that all of us need to show up and support and are impacted by that. And so, I'm really, really concerned about the exacerbation in the health and wealth disparities we already see in the way that this plays out, because trust and believe, white women are still going to go get their abortions. The rest of us, though, are out of luck.
And what angers me too is that people say, oh, 70 million, billion Black babies have been aborted since 1970, all this bullshit. It's the way, it's kind of like how they try and racialize crime. Oh, Black on Black crime, Black on Black crime. Abortion, when I think about it, plenty of white women get abortions. Plenty of white women are doing it. You just don't even.
Abortions are white women. Let's not let them tell a story to make this seem like crack. They're trying to do, welfare queens, crack babies, and all these stereotypes about Black poverty. And it's not true. And in fact, it was actually women leading the Women's Live movement who are completely well-heeled, that were college-educated women that wanted to pursue their careers and got knocked up by accident, that were the ones leading the access to abortion cause, right? So what happens is that there's such a stain on poverty that we try to criminalize and we try to defame Black women who are trying to make the same choices to advance their lives as well-heeled white women get to make all the time, without the nastiness and the stereotype.
Yeah, agreed. And I just think we have to really be careful of those narratives and falling for a social media meme and so on. Before you go, I do want to play a clip of the judges on the Supreme Court who, I don't know, I know you can't trust them, but they in many ways reassured us that Roe v. Wade was settled law. And again, no matter how you feel, they're coming for abortion, they're coming for Roe v. Wade, they're coming for something else next. Listen to this, Aisha.
Is Roe a super precedent?
How would you define super precedent? And I'm answering a lot of questions about Roe, which I think indicate.
Aisha, I can't stand, Justice Clarence Thomas.
Oh God!
But at least he was honest. I mean, at least we knew he was going to Jim Crow us. As we knew it. We knew he was the anti-Thurgood Marshall. At least he was honest with it. All the signs pointed to, I don't give a damn, Black, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What does this say? That we have these justices who explicitly lied to the American people?
Well, it says that the American people fell for the rope-a-dope, because we already knew this. This is kind of like, are you going to believe what you know to be true based on everything I've said in the past? Or are you going to believe what I'm saying to you today, right? Like, we always knew who these folks were, and we let them get on the stand in those hearings and lie, right? And lie to us. And then the US senators put them on the damn bench anyway. So I think that, if there's a moral to the story, it's that elections matter. And elections have consequences. And all those US senators, and by the way, Joe Biden put Clarence Thomas up on the bench, right? And
Lord have mercy.
kind of and was nasty to Anita Hill. That's a whole different conversation from 1991 is when that went down.
Yes.
But these senators who put these people on the bench did it full and well knowing not only who they were, Clay, but like I started off saying, this, in order for a case to get to the Supreme Court, there are a lot of things that have happened on the ground in the lower courts to get here. We knew when Amy Coney Barrett was getting confirmed, that this was building up and this case might come right out of Mississippi. We knew what all had been going down in Texas over the years that have been an attempt to pass crazy laws and to try to like fight in the courts, because the anti-abortion movement has been thirsting to get these cases in front of the Supreme Court, which is why during all of these confirmation hearings with Brett Kavanaugh, the questioning from the Democrats was specifically about Roe versus Wade and trying to get them on the record to like, see how they were going to buck. But at the end of the day, everybody knew this was going to happen. And so I would just say that sadly, we are getting what we got, and we knew we were going to get it. And that is why elections matter, because when you have crazy Donald Trump, who only got one term, be able to appoint three justices. And then you have Barack Obama's biggest failure was that he didn't just appoint Merrick Garland, who was also milquetoast and neither here nor there, but nonetheless, Barack Obama should have taken that opportunity during a recessed appointment to go ahead and get his Supreme Court pick up there on the bench, and he didn't do it. And let me tell you what, the fallout is going to go down for at least a generation. It was his worst move. It's probably the biggest failure of the Obama administration. And so, here we are. We could have predicted it. And now that we know, right, we're sitting here, we're Monday morning quarterback, what we saw coming, right? It's kind of like a train wreck, watching it all go down. The question is, what are we going to do? And midterms are coming up. The balance of power in Congress is always, it's always kind of skittish, right? There's a lot of pressure to be put, I think, on the Senate Democrats in particular, but on Congress generally and the president. What are they going to do? Are they going to add more seats to the Supreme Court, recognizing today how in short order, it's only been a few months, literally, and in short order in this iteration of the court, we're seeing these politically fueled rulings. It's really going to suffocate us for a generation. So what's going to happen? Are the Democrats going to have the courage to say we need to change this system and this structure because it ain't working? That's what I'm waiting to see. Is Chuck Schumer going to revisit a conversation about whether we need to add some more people up there so that those rabid conservatives don't just get to run amok? Is Joe Biden even going to wade into a conversation about how to maybe rein them in and have some accountability? I don't know. We'll see. I'm not really optimistic today because it's been a crazy week already. But I want everybody who's listening to us to just recognize that there are still levers of change. There's still fights to have. There's still work to be done, and consequently, levers of change are really in the hands of the people, but they're also about the people. And unless we are holding our elected officials accountable, who, Congress right now in this moment can actually pass a measure to codify Roe versus Wade into law, which would completely neutralize all of this. Is Congress going to do it? And are we going to force them to do it? We can't let up. There are levers of change. We just need to flex them.
I hear you, and I think it's difficult when you have Dixiecrats who are Democratic senators. Dixiecrats never left, actually. Some people think that we get caught up in these bipartisan, politics. I'm with whatever party that will protect the most vulnerable. Right. If this were 1875, I'd be Republican.
I'd be a Republican, absolutely. Yeah, these names mean nothing.
They mean nothing, especially to Black folks. They mean nothing to me. I have no loyalty to it. And we have Dixiecrats who are on the Democratic side that are eroding our democracy.